Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about the concept of feedback, but not necessarily in the sense that you probably have heard it, that someone gives you personally feedback, but more in the general sense in which you can use it to analyze systems in nature or society, and which is very helpful to improve your thinking. Also, feedback is used a lot in technical applications in this general sense I'm talking about. Probably the one thing where you know about feedback in a technical sense is when someone has a microphone close to a sound output, and then they make a sound, and then it rises all the time, because what is happening is there's a there is an amplifier which makes the sound louder, which then comes out of the box, goes into the microphone, and then it again is made louder, and so that's why it's rising all the time. So that would be an example for a so-called positive feedback where it's basically always increasing. There always is a concept called negative feedback, which in a technical sense simply means that you have a loop, and it starts, and then it's basically reduced when it goes through, and this can be used to stabilize certain systems. Actually, this is used in the way that you use transistors, which then you can use to make up microchips. You use this kind of negative feedback to stabilize their output signals, and I'm not sure how modern microchips are exactly built, but when we studied those basic segments which are in microchips, and that was something which occurred in them all the time. So that's just the general idea of this kind of system. But this actually occurs a lot in nature. Basically, whenever there's things which can influence each other, you can kind of understand it as a feedback mechanism. Which also means feedback can go over several different steps. For example, you can have a very simple model of from biology. You say, okay, there's rabbits, and there is foxes, and foxes eat rabbits, and if there's very few foxes, then there will be many rabbits, because no one catches them, and if there's enough food, they can just eat it, but then there will be more foxes because they get a lot of food. But if there's many rabbits, will increase the number of foxes, but then the foxes will eat more rabbits, so many foxes will reduce the number of rabbits, and then you get kind of a circle where it's always shifting up and down, and you can understand this as a feedback process. Of course, this is very simplified, because you also need to take into account like the number of food of the rabbits, and so on. And then if you really want to describe nature, then you will get many different feedback loops all connected to each other, and we're back in evolutionary processes. But actually, as you can understand, one part of evolutionary processes to be these kind of feedback loops. So we can find this kind of feedback loops. We use it in technology, but we can also find it in nature to describe systems where things kind of depend upon each other or are related to each other, where you will always get a certain relationship, and this creates this kind of feedback loops. But we can also find it in our societies. For example, if there's a certain kind of music which is popular, then this will give an incentive for musicians who are deciding what music to make. Then they will be influenced by the music that is around them, and so there will be kind of a feedback, because if they get popular, they of course will also make this kind of music again more popular. And we know that this doesn't necessarily keep on forever, because at some point other effects will lead to a change, but you can see a certain feedback going on. The same with all of us. If we do something and people tell us that they like it, then we're more likely to do it again. I think this is a general experience we all have. this doesn't necessarily mean that whenever we get feedback, we will have a result that is as the person wants. If we don't care about the person, then the feedback probably won't do anything. If we hate the person, or we dislike them, or we just do not agree with the feedback they give us, it might lead to the opposite, and we might double down on whatever we do. But if it's someone that's important to us, then we might actually consider it and try to adapt our behavior. So with humans, we're not as simple as a technical system, so it's not as clear what will happen, but we can also be affected by feedback. And also what you can see affected by feedback is a lot of what's going on around us in society. It's kind of like you look at politics, and there's a feedback between politics and the people. Politicians make a decision and or try to convince the population of something, and this will influence the population in some way, and the reaction will again influence how the politician behaves further along. So you can also kind of say there's some kind of feedback loop that's building up there. You also can see feedback loops, for example, if you look at the stock market, and if you look at how there is now a lot of automated trading, where there is a risk that feedback loops build over a lot of those automatic trading algorithms, which is one reason why it's more and more complicated to actually see or understand what's going on in the stock markets, because there can be such very long feedback loops build up and lead sometimes to like some flash crashes and things like this. So it's actually quite useful to think about this concept of feedback, which is very simple. As I said, it's basically just, okay, it is whenever there is a start, which then moves through a certain number of steps and then influences itself again. And of course the input can be changed in many ways on the way back to me, back to whatever was the starting point. But for example, if it's me, one other example, I can try to start a rumor. So I go to someone and tell them a rumor, and then I just let it go, and at some point, depending on my social circle, but quite likely at some point the rumor will get back to me, but it will probably have changed on the way, and this might influence me in some way. Of course, if I recognize my own rumor and know it's wrong, I probably won't, except that I see, oh, that's interesting, but it can be changed on the way, and then it might, for example, if I hear it from someone I don't know, then I might be convicted in whatever was said, even though I personally probably just made it up. So those are examples for such feedback loops, which can also build everywhere in society around us. And we also should be aware that we sometimes build those feedbacks ourselves. So if I just pick friends who always agree with me, then we're building a feedback loop where we just strengthen each other's convictions. Now, this is something you might choose to do. Personally, I believe it's better to have a diverse variety of viewpoints around me, either by having different kind of friends or by looking for other sources to get a diverse variety of viewpoints, because it's also very easy to kind of strengthen each other in a wrong belief. And as I've said in videos before, you have to be very careful to check your beliefs and to kind of try to find the best description of what's going on. And such feedback loops might be a problem and destroy this process, or at least make it harder. You could also see, for example, like this kind of YouTube binging, where there's an algorithm that shows you similar videos again. It's also a feedback process, because you give input to YouTube, and then YouTube, the algorithm, calculates what kind of videos you seem to like, and they give it to you again, and so you kind of see similar videos all the time, which which has the advantage of you being offered more likely videos that you enjoy, but which of course always carries the risk that some other videos which might be interesting or useful to you just don't show up for you. But of course there's so many videos, you cannot watch all of them, so some kind of decision needs to be made. And so there's again a feedback process. And this feedback process is neutral outcome, neutral. It's not a positive or negative thing, because it just depends on what is your goal, what you want to reach. You can also, for example, to go back to the YouTube algorithm, use this feedback to kind of build a very good information diet for yourself. Again, it depends a bit on your opinion what would be a good information diet, but for example, if you're interested in a certain TV show, then you can kind of teach the algorithm to show you a lot of videos about this TV show. And then for you that would be a good outcome. Not for someone who doesn't like this TV show, but for you it would be. If you want to improve your knowledge and insight around the world, there's actually many whole lectures, like real academic lectures you can find on YouTube. And so if you kind of teach your algorithm that you like to watch those lectures, then you will probably have quite a good high quality input which you can get from YouTube. So at the same time you can kind of do it with cat videos. But if you do not intentionally steer the feedback, then you will get into some evolutionary process which can lead you anywhere, not necessarily in a good way. So you have to kind of be able to step back and see what's going on, that there is a feedback process, and then you can try to influence it. And you can also, in some cases, if you see there's a certain feedback process, you can stop it. That's what you do in the example with the microphone and the noise building up. The way to stop it is to switch off the microphone or switch off the box or disconnect them in some way, and then it closes down. And this is also an example of a feedback which has problematic results, which is something which can happen with feedback. So you always have to understand the process, and then you can kind of see how can you influence it. And the most extreme is to stop it. For that you need to understand the loop. If you understand the loop, you can say, okay, here I try to stop the loop. Now, if you do not understand, maybe you understand the loop and you don't want to stop it, and then you need to influence it. You can say, okay, there's different parts in the loop, what can I influence? For example, you could also try to dampen the signal at the microphone. Put something on top of it so that it doesn't take the signal from the box, or move it away from the box. That's an option. And that can also work. So there's different ways to deal with something like that. You can also see, for example, you can also understand the whole problem we have at the moment around climate change. That there is such feedback processes, because everything in nature kind of influences each other, and we as people also influence it. And so this creates problems. And this helps with the problems. It creates problems because there is some feedback loops in nature which, once they start, even if we don't do anything, they might worsen things or make things more extreme, or create them in a way which is worse for us and our living conditions. There's also the option that there's certain stabilizing feedback processes, where there is a process which is a feedback process which actually reduces negative effects. This is one reason why it's so hard to model those things and to make very precise predictions. Even though you can say overall we have more problems, it's not always so easy to say, like, make a prediction it will be exactly in this year or that year, even though you can say over time it's certain to happen. But it's very hard to have the time window because we don't know all the feedback processes in nature, and things might be faster if there's many feedback processes which drive it, even beyond the simple effects created by humanity. But it might also take longer if there's more effects which kind of stabilize it against whatever we're doing. And so it's important to understand those feedback processes. It's also important to understand that we are part of the feedback process. One very simple example, it gets warmer. So what do? Well, we'll probably buy some cooling systems. But cooling systems will use up energy, and they will actually use up more energy than they cool us down. That's just a law of nature. That's the second law of thermodynamics, if you're interested in where you can read it up. And that means, well, we use energy, and if we create this energy by burning fossil fuel, we'll actually put out more CO2, and we'll actually increase the velocity or the rate of climate change, and we'll make things worse for ourselves. So we kind of have to understand this and see, okay, probably this isn't the best feedback loop we're in. So how can we break it? Of course, we can say, okay, I won't use any AC, any cooling. We can also say, okay, I will use AC because otherwise I cannot live here, but I will be very careful not to use any fossil fuels to get the energy to do it. So more than one solution. Or you can say, okay, I will have the energy and I will probably blow up and I will burn some fossil fuel, but I'll do it in a way that I catch all the CO2 before it gets into the atmosphere. Or many other options. So we need to understand those feedback loops, and we need to understand that we have to break them. And I have a bit the climate change on my mind because there's a new ICC, the ICCP, I think it's, report, IPCC report out this week, and I'll probably, once I had time to look at it a bit more, I'd probably make a video about it. So that's why I have these examples on my mind. We need to understand how the feedback functions as good as we can, otherwise we cannot stop it. And we really... Let's get back to the feedback. So I think I've shown enough examples about feedback loops, and I think I gave you a good idea how they work. Look around you, you'll probably find them in many ways. One example would be also two people arguing, which kind of, depending on how they behave, they can just drive each other up, or they can calm each other down. And that's also a feedback, because one reacts to the other, and then things can build up or stay calm. And it really depends on how those people behave. If both people just go more into it, then it will build up and be stronger. If one of the people is calming, then it will stay on a certain level. If both are calming each other, then it will calm down quite fast. So you can see this is something which is a principle which you can apply in very small everyday activities, and you can describe it in understanding like the whole planetary ecosystem. You can understand it in how companies work in relationship to the economy and to other companies, because there's always those feedback processes going on. So I encourage you to kind of look at what's going on and see where are things influencing each other in a way that you can find some feedback process. So I think that's it for today. As I said, I will look at the climate change report at some time during the week and probably make another video about it. As always, if you enjoyed the video, share it with friends, like it. You can also always share the channel. If you have any feedback for me, things to improve, subjects to talk about, feel free to contact me. I'm always glad to have some feedback, and it might even influence what I do. So I'm happy to get it, and I wish you all the best, and until next time, goodbye.